Hey, it's Dr. Sherene McHenry of Fully Engaged, and I am so excited to be here with you tonight to talk about overcoming negative relationship patterns. In life, there are all kinds of people, and growing up, I pretty much had the belief that I was nice and I played nice, then everything would work out for me. I don't know how you were raised, but my hunch is some of you had the same teaching. Excuse me. Unfortunately, that left me a bit ill-equipped for life. And what we're going to talk about tonight are 5 types of people that you're going to run into again and again, unfortunately, in today's uncertain world. And I would like for you to be able to identify them, to have a vocabulary for how you see them, and also to simply have some tools for working with them. So if you're ready, I'm ready to jump right in. And what we'll do is we'll open it up at the end for questions. All right, so here's what we're going to be looking at tonight in negative relationship patterns. We're going to be looking at drainers. Just briefly, those are people who suck the life out of you. Takers, those are people who take more than they give in return. Gators are people who take jabs at you and have no problem biting your soul. Controllers are people who want to control the relationship and to get their own way, much more than the rest of us want to get our own way. And lastly, players, and these are people who make promises but don't follow through on those. And just from those brief descriptions, my hunch is you're already keying in some people in your workplace, in perhaps your family, in your friendships, and maybe even in some areas of your life, you. And here's what I want you to do tonight is simply to be encouraged that when we know better, we do better, and we're going to have some tools for you, and I'm super excited about that. My mentor, Dr. Brenda Freeman, taught me 20 years ago when I was in my doc program that bad behavior left unchecked grows. And I've had 20 years to watch that, and I would say she is spot on. Maya Angelou says we teach people how to treat us, and that people tell us who they are, that we need to believe them. And so what I want to do is just give you, again, a vocabulary and an understanding of how people might be wired and what's going on, and again, ways that you can specifically counterbalance any of these 5 types of negative relationship patterns. So let's jump right in. The first are going to be the drainers. And drainers tend to go from crisis to crisis. Bad things happen to drainers, and it appears that much more than their share of bad things happen to drainers. They tend to be chronically unhappy and, again, in a heightened state of tension and anxiety. And what they really want when they're coming to see you is to drain, dump, get these horrible feelings that they're feeling inside out. And unfortunately, if all you do is listen to them, then they're a bit like a teapot on the stove. You can cool down the water just a little bit, but unless you take it off of the heat, the teapot's going to immediately begin whistling again. And that's what happens over and over and over with drainers. So one of the key things that you need to understand about drainers is that in some areas of their life, they are underfunctioning. And that means not doing their share, not taking responsibility for their choices in life. And each of us is responsible for our time, our money, our well-being, our happiness, and our jobs. And again, a drainer might be functioning in one of those areas, but under-functioning in others. And so they may be chronically talking about the same problem. They may have an alcohol problem. They may have somebody in their life that has an alcohol or a chemical dependency problem. I don't know exactly what that's going to look like in each individual, but here's what I do know, is that drainers come in and it's almost like they have this vacuum hose that they put on your chest, and all of a sudden they go, and there goes your life and your energy. And here's what I'm hoping that you will do. Instead of letting them suck your lifeblood out of you and take away the best part of your energy that you need for your time, your well-being, your finances, your job, your life, your hopes and dreams, I don't want them to suction that off from you. And unless you're very, very careful, they will do that ever so skillfully because they hook into the nice part of you that feels sorry for them, that is shocked by what they're going through. You know, my brother hired somebody. Actually, what he did is he bartered with somebody to do some carpentry work for him. He was a renter. He was down on his luck. And so my brother thought that that was a way that it could both be a win-win. Sounds great, doesn't it? It was great, right up until the point where he didn't come on time, where he broke things, where he actually sold my brother's tools to a pawn shop. And my brother began to see how this man, although he had had hard thing after hard thing happen to him, actually contributed to many of the hardships that were happening in his life. Now, that said, there are boulders in life. There are life's crushing blows, and I don't want you to become hard-hearted and not be willing to help people. But what we're talking about with drainers is chronic. Same problem over and over and over. And wise people who are healthy look for patterns, and they begin to see the patterns. And so what I want you to do is look for patterns and just be aware that drainers exist. So in my life, one of the things that I've noticed with drainers is, depending on how much time and energy I have, there are some days that I can give people more than other days. And I'm as compassionate as anyone that I know. And I will cry with you. I'll be mad with you. I will be there for you if you have an emergency and something catastrophic or terrible has happened in your life, or something that's caused you pain has happened in your life. And I will point you in the right direction for what you need. I lose my compassion when the person comes back and has done nothing differently. And then it becomes my responsibility to see that pattern. And so I want you to be equipped to never lose your soft-heartedness, your generosity. Part of what makes America a wonderful place to live is this spirit of helpfulness when people are down. But drainers get caught in the pattern, and that's what we're looking to help you not take on a drainer's life responsibility. Because again, each person is responsible for their own time, their money, their job, their well-being, and their happiness. And no matter how badly you want to help somebody who has it rough, if you try to overfunction in any of those areas, it's never going to work, and it will never be enough. So what do you do with a drainer? You might be asking. I'm so glad you want to know that. One of the things that you need to do is you need to set boundaries. And one of those boundaries is how much time and emotional energy that you're willing to give somebody. And on a day where you have nothing to do, you're feeling great and generous, you may have an hour that you would be willing to give somebody. On a day when you don't have a lot of energy, then that may be 5 minutes or 15 minutes. So you begin to limit how much time you spend with them, because at the end of it you will be drained, and then you're not going to have what you need for your own dreams, for your life, for your money, for your well-being, for your happiness, and for your job. And so boundaries are key here. Short amount of time, and here's another boundary that I set. Again, I will help you with every ounce of compassion in my body the first time that you come to me with a problem. If you come back to me with the same problem, I'm not going to have the same emotional investment. And the third time that you tell me, or a drainer tells me the same problem, I'm probably going to do what I did with a friend a couple of months ago, which is, hey, the way I see it is you've either got to figure out a way to resolve this, or you're going to have to exit the system. The only thing that I know is that you're in pain, and that this is a conversation that we've had multiple times. I can't help you unless you're willing to help yourself. And wonderfully enough, this person did what it took to get a new job and is doing fantastic at this point. Boundaries sound harsh, but what you need to know is boundaries protect relationships and they protect resources. And if you choose not to have a boundary with a drainer, then over time you're probably going to blow up at them because you're going to get frustrated, or you're going to disappear, which is confusing to them. So I would love for you to be assertive and upfront and let people know that you are there for them, but that you're not going to carry their life load. So one of the things that I suggest in mitigating a drainer is asking them to take the kettle off of the burner. So again, the problem is putting it back in the heat. And so if we want a different result, we need to do something differently. And that's what we want to ask drainers to do. Now, one of two things will happen when you ask a drainer to function at an appropriate level and to begin to make changes in their life. Number one, they will. And how wonderful for them and how wonderful for you. This is a person who needed a nudge, who needed some help, who needed pointed in the right direction. It's absolutely a win if they begin functioning at the appropriate level. The other thing that might happen is they will get very angry with you. They will cry. They will yell. They will tell you that you're selfish and an attempt to keep you, allowing them to drain you. And what I would say to you is this is where you want to protect your resources and be very careful not to overfunction. And if you choose not to do that and they choose not to change their behavior so that they're not caught in this drainer cycle, then what's going to happen is they're going to have to find somebody else to drain. And the truly sad thing about drainers is they burn through relationships on a regular basis, and they don't always know why they're doing that. And so I encourage you to give them the gift of gentle honesty and to recognize that when there's a drainer and there's a pattern, that you got to take the kettle off of the burner. You got to change the heat under the kettle. It's not enough to pour a little bit of steam out. And unfortunately, they're caught in a pattern thinking that, oh, they feel so much better when there's just a little bit of breathing room. But nothing has changed, so it's going to cycle again and again and again. I hope that helps you understand drainers in a brand new way and helps you really understand how important it is to not get caught in that cycle. Again, I am a big believer that each of us was put on this planet at this time for a purpose, and that people function best when they are living their purpose. Organizations function best when they hire people who are working toward their purpose, and that if you choose to squander your time and your energy taking care of everybody else, then you're not going to be able to fulfill your purpose on this planet at this time. And that, I think, is a true travesty. So let's move on. The next people that we're going to talk about in a negative relationship pattern are the takers in life. And this is a pretty self-explanatory designator. Takers, by definition, take more than they give. Now, I'm not saying to you that every day in a relationship, I need to give 100%, you need to give 100%, although that's nice and ideal. I need to give 50%, you need to give 50%, and that we're keeping score. That's not what I'm talking about here at all. What I'm talking about is reciprocity. And what I find is people who are engaged in relationships with takers sometimes don't value themselves enough to want to be in a relationship that is give and take. Because in any relationship that's healthy, there is give and take. There are days when I have more energy. There are days when you have more energy. There are days when I'm down. There are days when you're down. And so what we want to be is in a relationship that's a bit like a teeter-totter. It goes up and down a little bit. But we don't want things that are out of balance where a teeter-totter gets stuck and one person does all the giving and the other person does all the taking. And so what characterizes a taker is they will take whatever you will give. And that can be your time, your energy, your emotional generosity, your money, the things that you own, borrowing those. It's literally, again, anything that you will give. And you know that they're a taker when you ask for something in exchange and they disappear. So I don't know how many times this has happened to you, but I'm hunching it's more than you can count. You have a friend who tends to be a bit of a drainer and an emotional taker, and you're emotionally generous, you listen to them, and in this relationship, you're the one that they lean on. And then all of a sudden, one day, you have a need, and something happened. You got upset at work, sorrow happened in your life, but you really needed a friend and somebody to have a reciprocal relationship so that you could be taken care of. And you begin to talk and you get 2 or 3 sentences out of your mouth, and all of a sudden the taker takes back the conversation with usually a, oh my gosh, I know exactly what you're talking about. And then they launch back into their story, and here you, who have opened up your heart and asked for something maybe for the first time in this relationship, is pushed again to the back. And your job is very, very clear, which is your job is to take care of these people and to give to them. I was working with a woman a while back, and she identified that she was in a relationship with a lot of takers. There was a group of people, and she did all the giving, it appeared in her mind, and they did all of the taking. And so she mustered up her courage, and what she did was what I'm going to suggest that you do is begin to set boundaries. And you're going to see this as a theme tonight. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Boundaries are your best friend. They may not feel like it, but they are your best friend. And so what she did was she had an honest conversation, and she asked for something in exchange. And not a one of those women was ready, willing, or able to give that to her. And she did what you have to do. She went home and she mourned as she told herself the truth about these lopsided relationships where people were perfectly willing to take what she had to give, but unwilling to give when she had a need. And she began to weed those people out of her life. And the most amazing thing happened is there was room then in her life for people who were healthier and people who were willing to give. And so one of the things that I would say to you is if you're caught in a relationship with a taker or a number of takers, you really want to look at what's going on there. And if you have perhaps a belief that you have to earn something in a relationship, or there's something going on that's evoking this caretaking in you. And I want to suggest to you again that we want people functioning at an appropriate level. And if you overdo and take care of things for a taker, then what you're doing, sadly, is enabling them to underfunction. And that causes them some real long-term consequences in life. And I want you to value yourself enough to request and expect reciprocal relationships. And when you ask this, again, one of two things will happen. They'll say, oh my gosh, I had no idea, I'm so sorry, and they show up. And they quit mooching, and they quit taking advantage of your generosity, and they show up and begin participating in the relationship as a high-functioning adult. Or they go and they find somebody else to take from. It's as simple as that. And of course, there may be some recriminations in the middle as they try to manipulate you into doing what it is that you've done for so long that has benefited them. Again, as harsh as it may sound, either of those is a victory. And ideally, a taker steps up to the plate, realizes what they've done, and becomes a functioning adult. And if they don't, that's okay. They're going to go find somebody else. That's what they do. They'll latch onto them and mooch off of them. And hopefully that person will begin to set a boundary and tell them the truth. Unfortunately, when we don't tell people the truth, we never really give them an option to change their behavior. And just a simple example of this that fits is when I was writing my book, I had a group of an editing party, and one of the chapters, I read one of the comments, and they're like, this paragraph doesn't make sense. And my brain said, well, of course it makes sense. You obviously didn't read the paragraph ahead. But 4 people later telling me that it was unclear, it became very clear to me that perhaps the writer had made an error and was not clear, and that would be me. Well, it's the same with takers or with drainers or anybody else in life. Is perhaps the first time we hear it, we don't believe it. And we don't want to believe it, and we don't want to hear it. But after 3 or 4 people care enough to tell us the truth gently, we usually can begin to look at our own behavior and begin to make better choices. And again, when we know better, we do better. So part of this, the onus is on you, is to know that you are worth having relationships that are give and take, and that part of being in a healthy relationship is receiving. It's not just giving. And if any of you are counselor types, are compassionate by nature, you may be out of balance in a number of your relationships. And this is a little bit difficult to stop doing because you're probably going to feel guilty if you don't take care of other people. And so again, I look at it as John Townsend of Boundaries fame does, which is when there's a boulder or life's crushing blow, we want to be there. And when it comes down to people's time, money, well-being, job, and happiness, each person is responsible for themselves. And Dr. Phil has often said that you can't take care of money problems with money. And so just in case you're still on the fence as to whether or not you're a taker, is there anybody that you have lent money to more than once who hasn't paid you back? And if the answer is yes, you are part of that dance and that problem. And I'm going to encourage you to shut off the bank and to quit overfunctioning for people. And I have found over the last 25 years that guilt goes away. And I often feel guilty when I don't take care of people and don't want to overindulge drainers, but resentment builds. And when I have to pick between the two, I'm going to pick guilt every time. It has a lot less ramifications. And for me, it goes away anywhere from 15 minutes to 3 days. Resentment, on the other hand, builds and can lead into depression and other mental health issues. And so you want to just be really careful to live a resentment-free life. And sometimes you have to pick guilt over resentment in order to do that. All right. Moving right along, we're going to talk next about gators. And this negative relationship pattern involves people who, by and large, are passive-aggressive. And so they typically are under-functioning in that they're not dealing with problems as they're coming up. And so instead of having a conversation with you and asking you for what they need or would like, they take jabs at you. And they do that almost always under the guise of humor. And if you have the audacity to call them on that behavior, then what they do is they tell you that you need to get a sense of humor. So I want you to be aware of when you're around somebody and everything's fine, then all of a sudden it's like a sniper just took a shot at you. That's a jab, that's passive aggressive, that's gator behavior. And so it's very interesting, the research on people says that what we do in life and what people do in life, especially people who aren't as healthy as other people, is they test out rehearsal behaviors. And so they will do a bad behavior like a jab, and they want to see what you're going to do. And if you don't do anything, then the jab is going to get worse and worse and worse and worse over time. And what starts off as a simple jab can over time become verbal, emotionally, or physically abusive. And so I want you to be very, very aware as to the relationships that you don't feel safe in and relationships that you have to really be hypervigilant and aware. It's a lot like an alcoholic in the family. When they're good, they're really good. And when they're bad, it's bad. And unfortunately, people in an alcoholic family, just as people with gators in their lives, have to live in hypervigilance land because you don't know when it's going to happen. And when you live in hypervigilance land in a relationship, what happens is you are forced into a protective stance and to, again, always being on guard. And that siphons off your energy for enjoying life, for enjoying healthy relationships, for being able to fulfill your purpose on this planet at this time, for having your hopes and dreams come true. And it causes a phenomenal amount of stress and will keep you with stress hormones flooding your body, which is really bad for your health. And so I really want to encourage you to be aware of gators. And one of the things that I like to say when I talk about gators is that we keep them behind bars in a zoo for a reason. They are not safe. And yet so many people allow them to run around in their lives and have access to their children. And so what I want you to do is recognize people for who they are. And again, a baby gator is pretty easy to take care of. You say you don't like it. A big gator is much, much, much more difficult. So what do you do with a gator? Well, you set boundaries about how it is and now it isn't okay to speak to you. I've told this story many times, and it's one of my favorite ones with a baby gator. But 4 weeks into my first job as a professor, I had a colleague, and they took a gator jab at me and took a bite. I'm like, I didn't like it. It was in public. It didn't feel good, and I knew it wasn't safe. And I thought, this doesn't work for me. So I walked into their office, and I said, are you angry with me? And they said, no. I said, have I offended you? And they said, no. Well, I would prefer you not take a jab at me in meetings. I didn't take a jab at you. Yeah, it didn't feel real good. I would prefer you not do that. I'm just really stressed out right now, which is a pretty gator way to tell me to back off. Wouldn't you agree? And I said, well, I understand that you're stressed, and I would still prefer that you not speak to me that way. If you have a problem, I'll be happy to work with you on it. 1 year later, after behaving for an entire year, 4 weeks into year 2, she did the exact same behavior, and we had a verbatim conversation. Verbatim conversation. And she behaved another year. Year 3, 4 weeks into the semester, would you believe it? We had the exact same conversation. Only this year I ended the conversation with, I'm wondering what we would like to do differently so that we don't have to have this conversation again. And she behaved for 13 years, at which point she gator bit me again. And I went in and had a conversation with her and told her I would prefer not to be spoken to that way. That was a colleague to colleague. I have no power over this person, but I can tell them the truth and tell them how their behavior impacts me, and they get a choice what they want to do about it. When gators are small, the first time they're doing that rehearsal behavior, if you'll call them on it, they can almost always shift. What happens, though, is they grow bigger every time. And just as Dr. Freeman said, bad behavior left unchecked grows. You got to be really careful because gators get huge. So you're going to set boundaries, and you're going to tell yourself that you are too valuable to be on the receiving end of gator bites. And then you're going to call them on their behavior. When it's a colleague, this is something that you can give them face-to-face. You can ask for what you need. You don't have any power necessarily to bring about change. If it's a boss, again, it can be very difficult and frightening. But one of the things that you can do is you can pull in a more powerful person. And you have a legal right to a non-hostile work environment. You have a right to be safe in your own home and in your own skin. And you have a right who you pick and let close to you as a friend. So here's what I would say the research says is if people can modify their behavior, fantastic. If they can't, then, and they are a big gator, then I'm going to really strongly encourage you to get professional help because they're too big to fight on their own. And so that could be a counselor, that might be a shelter, whatever it is that it takes, you're going to want to get some help. All right, let's move on to the next negative relationship pattern. This one is the controller. And they are people who like to have their own way, which I'm not saying any of us in this webinar don't. The difference is they have a real need to control people's behavior and to get their own way. And oftentimes they see that as a game. And so they tend to be incredibly manipulative. And they will manipulate with their tears. They manipulate people with anger and aggression. They manipulate people by withdrawing from the situation or punishing people. I worked with somebody once, and her husband had made her angry, and she didn't speak to him for 3 weeks. That is incredibly manipulative and unhealthy for a marriage or any relationship. The other thing that controllers do is they often lie to get their own way. And so, again, people tell you who they are. You need to be really, really careful with controllers. Now, sometimes there are some mental illness things going on here that are really scary, and there may be pathology. But in its lesser form, it's more frightened people, people whose needs haven't been met, people who are afraid their needs haven't been met, and they can just really move into some childish and aggressive behavior and a desire to get you to do what they want. And they may be able to do that in the short run with people. Unfortunately, nobody likes to be controlled. And so over time, this game grows very, very weary on the person that these behaviors are being acted upon. And hopefully they do one of two things. They set some boundaries and they ask the person to behave at a better level, and the person does, or the person doesn't, and then they have some real choices that they have to make. And I've had some firsthand experience with controllers in the workplace and as a boss, and it's really scary, and it also really negatively impacts the work environment and relationships. And so if you see somebody and they appear to enjoy manipulating people for sport, they have told you who they are. And that's one of the things that you're going to want to look for as you let people close to your life, and you're going to want to evaluate the people that you have already close to your life, be it in the workplace or in your personal life. So again, what do? You set boundaries, and you call them on that behavior, and if you need to, you get professional help. The hard part about the controllers are they are really good at what they do, and they are very well defended in most cases. And just like the gators, which can be a controlling behavior, they are very, very good at making sure that their victim, i.e. you, if you're in a relationship with them, is made to feel at fault for having feelings, for having desires, for having anything that doesn't match what it is that they want. So I want to really encourage you, when you see people playing with people for sport, to be very, very careful not to give them access to your life. Those are the scariest to me because they don't have a lot of compunction about it. But again, there are people who are trying to get their needs met, and they're going to go try and do that hook or crook. And so really want you to be able to stand back, recognize manipulation and controlling for what it is, and then begin to make your choices. And again, you want to have an honest conversation. And in an ideal world, they'll say, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I was doing that, and they'll change their behavior. And if they're unready, willing, or able to do that, you don't want to have the same conversation with them 20 times. I made the mistake of doing that with a colleague, and I always came away bloodied, and because I'd been running into a brick wall, and she left the interactions laughing. And it took me 16 years to figure out that I needed to try a different strategy, and that doing the same thing over and over and over, which most of us do, results in the same result over and over and over. And so I needed to learn to change up my dance steps, and when I did that, the relationship shifted. And that's, again, where a really good professional can help you. Coaches can help you with that. Controllers, just, you want to be careful is all I have to say. And you want to be careful not to be controlling. One of the things that you can tell a person's mental health is their willingness to accept your no. And so if you have somebody, when you tell them no and they begin to control you, manipulate you, or anything, it's a really good indicator of where they are. And again, then you need to make some choices about what you want to do. And we're going to talk about that on May the 15th because I have a webinar coming up I'd love for you all to be a part of. And that's something that we're going to delve into deeper there, which is how do you do the positive parts of this? How do you create what you want instead of keeping out what you don't want and dealing with people that you have some real concerns about given their behavior, these negative behavioral patterns. All right, last one we're going to talk about tonight are the players. And players are an interesting bunch. They tend to be charming people. They often are very, very well liked. And they fly in under the radar and they make promises and people think they're going to follow through. And sadly, they do not. This can be a parent, it can be a boss, it can be a sibling, it can be a spouse, it can be a friend, it can be a colleague, it can be somebody that you admire and you decide to work on something together and, well, it just doesn't work out because you're the one who's over-functioning and doing all the work. And this is particularly devastating to children when this happens with parents. And they learn very early on that adults can't be trusted and that people can't be trusted. And again, they live in hypervigilance land and they want for good things to happen, but they're very, very fearful. Same thing happens in adults. Players, boy, they're a little bit like fool's gold. You know, they're shiny, they're bright, things look good, things sound good, but when it comes right down to where the rubber meets the road, they simply are unwilling, ready, or able to deliver. And they get away with it because they're charming and because we want a relationship with them, so we cut them a lot of slack. And so what I want you to do, if you've got a player in your life, is to begin to, oh my gosh, what are we going to do once again? Set some boundaries. And so this is painful, very, very painful. In order to set a boundary with anybody, a player in particular, you have to be willing for the relationship to end. And if you set a boundary with them and you hold them accountable for what they've promised and you tell them when they drop the ball how their behavior impacts you, well, they will either step up to the plate and start to function at an appropriate level, or they'll exit out of the system and go play somebody else, because it's a lot easier to make promises and not have to follow through than it is to do the hard work of living life, of delivering on those promises, of doing their share of the work. Again, a player is simply an underfunctioner. And every single one of these 5 behavioral patterns that we've talked about, people are underfunctioning. And when you choose to be in a dance with them and in a relationship with them and count on them, what you are doing is enabling them to stay in this behavior unless you choose to say something and to ask for more. And in order to do that, you have to believe that you are deserving of that. I've had a couple players in my life, and it's hard. One of them was a guy that I was very interested in and in a relationship with, and boy, that didn't work out, and he pretty much absolved himself of any responsibility for his behavior in the relationship. I wanted more. He didn't want to be asked for more. I finally set a boundary and asked for what I needed, and sure enough, he disappeared. And I was able to send him a letter because I wasn't able to talk to him after he disappeared and just tell him how his behavior had impacted me and what I would have preferred, and a chance just to tell him what I had appreciated about him and liked about him. And about 7 months later, we ran into each other and we were able to create a friendship that worked. And that was nice. Not so fun the other way. There are other players that I've talked to, and they get angry and they're manipulative, and they make you feel bad for asking for what you need, and they exit the system. So I had another person I was writing my first book with, and we were working together, and I was so excited. He was handsome, he was older, he was established, and here I was new, and he wanted to do something with me. And I was so flattered, and I didn't have a lot of confidence in my ability to write a book on my own. And so we set a time to meet, and we met, and we divvied up what we wanted the book to look like and what our assignment would be, and we met again, and he didn't do anything. And I had done my writing. And I was like, okay, I understand. And he had a really good excuse. And so we set another time to meet, and again, I did my work because I was committed to this book, and I wanted a bestseller, and I was so excited. And sure enough, he showed up with nothing. And so after 2 times, it got on my radar screen, and I'm starting to go, oh, something's wrong here, but we'll give him another chance. And 3rd time, exact same thing. I showed up with my work, and he showed up with nothing. And I started to think about this, and I thought, oh my gosh, if this book does what I want it to do and we get on Oprah, he is going to take credit for writing this book. And he won't have written a word. And I will come unglued on national television. That's not type of behavior that I need to be engaging in. And so I thought, all right, well, if I'm going to lose it on national TV, if he takes credit for this book, I'm going to have a conversation with him. And so we had a conversation, and he was deeply offended. And he did what players often do, is he tried to turn the tables and tell me what was wrong with me. And I told him that I would be happy to talk about that later, but could we please stick to the point at hand? And so we agreed to meet one more time. He said that he would write. Of course, he didn't do it because he was a player. And so we decided that we would get a professional divorce. We weren't married, but we were working together on this book. And he came up with our settlement, which I was perfectly willing to abide by, and that was that both of us could retain what we had written. And I thought, that works for me. Never seen a sentence, a word, a paragraph, nothing. Go ahead and keep it. And so we parted ways, and I've had the privilege of writing 2 books since then, and he never wrote anything. And that's okay. That's his choice. But it would have been my choice to overfunction for him. And so I really just want to encourage you to be aware that there are players in life, and they will be so happy to take credit for your work and to allow you to do all the work, and then they will reap the rewards. And there are going to be people who are not reliable, who are going to let you down. Sometimes it's going to be drug-induced, sometimes it's character flaw, sometimes it's laziness, sometimes they're not very good at telling themselves the truth about how long things take them to do. For whatever reason, there will be players who want to be close to you, especially if you're making things happen. And it's, again, your job to take care of your time, your money, your well-being, your happiness, and your job. And it's your job on this planet to be able to fulfill your purpose and to have and enjoy healthy, happy, life-giving relationships instead of relationships that drag you down and that tell you you have little or no value. And so what I want to do is open up the microphone, see if anybody has any questions, and then we'll go on from there. Any questions? All right, I'm good at my job. So if you do have a question and you don't want to answer it out loud, I'm going to mute these so we lose the echo. What you can do is type that to me or email that to me. What I'll do at the end of tonight is send you a recording of this. And again, you will be able to listen to that. You'll have my email and my phone number, and you are more than welcome to contact me. So here's what I want to tell you that I have available for you. We have, coming up on May the 15th at 7 p.m., a positive relationship patterns webinar. And what I want to do is help you create relationships that are typified by respect, by love, by happiness, by understanding, by boundaries, by compromise, by win-win situations, by trust and laughter and joy. And it's not that there's ever going to be a perfect relationship. If you and I are in a relationship, over time I will let you down. That is a given. You will let me down. There will be a misunderstanding. Something will happen. That is the nature of relationships between imperfect people. But what we want to do is help you strategically create positive relationship patterns in your life. And so I'm super, super excited about that. Again, we're going to create respectful, thoughtful, reciprocal, honest, intimate, and rewarding relationships. And we will give you a blueprint for doing that and for what to look for and what to cultivate in your life. So tonight we looked at the negative and looked at jettisoning that off. But what we want to do is fill your life with more positive relationship patterns and give you some tools and a mindset to do that. And so that will be, again, on May the 15th. It's only $29, and you can register by going to www.fullyengaged, that's FULLYENGAGED.US/relationships/. So again, that's www.fullyengaged.us/relationships/. Again, what a deal to learn information like that for $29. So I look forward to seeing you on this next call on May the 15th at 7 p.m., where we're going to look at attracting into your life what you want and need to have happy, healthy, thoughtful, reciprocal, intimate, wonderful relationships. Thanks so much for joining me for this webinar. I appreciate that you would spend this time and be so interested in improving your life and improving your relationships. And I look forward to working with you and helping you attract to your life what it is that you want more of and less of what you need and want less of. Have a wonderful evening. Thanks again for coming.